Hi, I'm Dr. Tracy Shroyer, a career positioning strategist, professor, and someone who spent a lot of time thinking about what it really means to grow in a world that just won't stop changing. Welcome to the Technically Human podcast. This podcast is about navigating your career, your identity, and your next chapter in a world that's shaped by AI, technology, and constant change. Here, we're going to talk about real stuff. We're going to talk about career pivots, uncertainty, reinvention, and mostly how to stay grounded in who you are while everything around you evolves. Are you ready to go? Let's dive in. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of Technically Human. I am joined by Dr. Craig Kaplan. So thank you, Dr. Kaplan, for joining me.
Sure. Great to be here. You can call me Craig if that's easier. That's fine.
Awesome. So, Craig, I wanted to open it up, just let you introduce yourself to the audience. We'll also have a little intro prior to the podcast episode as well. But if you want to do a quick intro for us.
Sure. And is it okay to call you Tracy or do you prefer Dr. Shroyer? What's best?
Tracy is perfectly fine. Thanks for asking.
Okay. Sure. So, Tracy, great to be with you. A little background on myself. I've been working in the field of AI since the 1980s. I studied at Carnegie Mellon for my PhD with Herbert Simon, who was one of the pioneers. There were 11 scientists, of which Herb was one, who named the field in 1956. And that was before I was born. But 30 years later, like Forrest Gump, I had the opportunity of studying right at the right place, right time, and got a great education with Herbert Simon, Alan Newell, and Jay McClelland, who was one of the pioneers, along with Jeff Hinton, of modern machine learning. So I have a very good grounding in AI, and I've spent most of my adult career building intelligent systems. And these days, I'm most concerned about AI safety and also collaboration between AI and humans. So that's a quick nutshell of my interests.
Awesome. Thank you. Craig, one of the things I found really interesting is as I was reading more about you and your background is when I saw the name Dr. Herbert Simon, I thought, that is really familiar for me for some reason. And I went back and I was looking, and when I had done my dissertation research, I had actually included some information from Dr. Simon. It was specific more to decision-making theory that he focused on. And it was very high level, but I'm like, I remember that name. It came up. So that was really interesting to see that connection with him and thinking about intelligence.
Yes. So his Nobel Prize was actually in economics, and he wrote a book that many business schools still reference, administrative behavior. So perhaps you came across that. I think you have a business school background or economics
hmm
background. Yeah.
Business. Yeah, definitely. So, if we think about artificial intelligence, one of the interesting things, and some people who are listening to this podcast may not realize, is how it dates back for decades. Some people think hearing about ChatGPT, Gemini, some of the different AI tools that are coming out just in the last few years or so, that it's really new, and it's not so much new. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you came to know or some of the background around artificial intelligence and what that looks like?
Sure. Yeah. It's useful context. So, a brief history of AI, I divided into three phases from 1956 till the mid 1980s. That is what I would call the age of symbolic AI. And the whole thing with symbolic AI was that people thought you could make machines intelligent by programming the rules or the intelligence into the machines. And so, starting in 1956, when the field was named, actually at that conference at Dartmouth, Herb Simon, Alan Newell, and a third gentleman, Cliff Shaw, in addition to arguing with the other scientists about what the field should be called, they actually presented one of the very first creative artificial intelligences. And I say creative because it was designed to come up with proofs of a mathematical textbook, replicate the proofs that were in the book, but it actually discovered a brand new proof that was not programmed into it, just in the process of searching for answers. It came up with a new proof. Bertrand Russell was one of the authors of the textbook. And Herb took the proof and mailed it off to England to Bertrand Russell and said, "Hey, look what our computer program has come up with." And Bertrand Russell wrote back and said, "Wow, this is completely new. We had not thought of this proof, and it's actually a very good one. So, right there in 1956 was an example of creative AI, but the type of AI and the way that it represented its information was all programmed in. Then, starting in the mid 1980s, you had the era of machine learning. So, this is the kind of AI that everybody thinks about today. It got its start way back in the mid 80s. And the new idea was, hey, rather than trying to program in rules that represent everything humans know about the world, what if we could just have the AI learn that for itself? And so today, when you train models like GPT, you just can take a good chunk of the internet, filter out the data, and you load that in to algorithms that run in data centers with lots of GPUs. And the AI systems, the large language models, learn this information. They learn the patterns in the information. So the good part about that is it's incredibly efficient once processing power got fast enough for it to work. And now you have ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and all these models that many of your listeners may be familiar with. The bad part is these models are black boxes. The researchers themselves have no idea how they represent the information. It makes the models very unpredictable and they can hallucinate. And that's turns out to be a little bit of a safety issue. But machine learning began in the 80s, and around sometime in the late 90s, it looked like it wasn't going anywhere. Neither approach to AI was really going anywhere. The field went into what was called the AI winter. And really, the problem was that the computers just weren't fast enough. There was nothing wrong with the algorithms, there was nothing wrong with the ideas, but we were just in this period of waiting every couple years for processing power to double until finally around 2010, 2012, enough doubling had happened that we started being able to see very practical results. And then the third era of AI, which we are in now, the third stage, I would sort of date from Thanksgiving of 2022 with the release of ChatGPT. And that's really when it burst into everybody's consciousness. And instead of it being this strange subject that only geeky computer scientists would study, now everybody's talking about AI. The largest company in the world, NVIDIA, is an AI company, and it's really come to dominate people's thinking about the future. So that's a quick history of it. And along the way, lots of interesting inventions and tremendous opportunity, but also some risks that I hope we get a chance to talk about.
Absolutely. So one of the things is I know more and more companies, they're either scared or they are starting to dig into like how can we leverage AI? How is it going to be helpful for us, for our employees, for our customers, things like that. But from that mid 1980s to the 2022, you have, I believe, from your consulting, from your work, you have seen companies that have leveraged the tools. Can you just share like a couple of ways that you have seen companies that leverage that before what we're seeing today and what people are seeing AI can do?
Sure. So I've spent several decades building intelligent systems, and the particular approach that I took is a little different than the mainstream approach. I focused on what's known as collective intelligence, or some people call it swarm intelligence, or the wisdom of the crowd. And so we were building these kinds of systems before people even knew the word crowdsourcing. People may be familiar with the word now, crowdsourcing. And I started a company. We did the prototypes back in 2000, but the company itself was incorporated in 2006. And it ran for 14 years until 2020 when I sold it. That was called Predict Wall Street. And that was an example of a company that used collective intelligence of millions of human beings primarily. And by pooling their knowledge and harnessing their knowledge in particular ways, we were able to actually beat the very best guys on Wall Street. So we used it to power a hedge fund, which then ranked in the top 10 in 2018, and it traded billions of dollars worth of trades. So the reason we did that company, I was not a Wall Street guy. I knew nothing about the stock market when I started, but we had a brainstorming meeting at our consulting company and said, what is the toughest problem that we can think of that's super competitive, where there's an easy scorecard to see how smart you are or how well you're doing? And one of the interns from Berkeley School of Business actually said, hey, over pizza and beer, how about Wall Street? If we can get an edge there, that would show everybody. And so that was the beginning of Predict Wall Street. So that was a system that used millions of humans, regular investors that might have a TD Ameritrade account or Schwab account. My company partnered with those brokers, and we were able to get inputs about stocks from them and then combine it to beat the best guys. But that same approach that works with human intelligence can also work with artificial intelligence. So today, everybody talks about AI agents. It's possible to build super intelligence, I believe, by harnessing millions of AI agents as well as humans. And it's very important that we include the humans. And if we hook them up in the right way, we can also get super intelligent behavior. So that's an approach that I've pursued for many years and one that we had some success with in a very tough field.
Thank you. When we think about artificial general intelligence, the AGI, and we think about the possibilities that can come about from that, which is very different from where we are today with the artificial intelligence that we have, a lot of people are very scared and they think about the challenges, the threats, and different things like that. What if you had a company that you're working with today and they were a little hesitant? What are some of the things that you might share with them as to why it would be a good idea to explore it, to look into it?
For better or worse, don't really think that companies have much of a choice. There are a lot of forces that are driving what some people call the AI arms race. And I don't think it's realistic that we can pause and stop it, or even if we wanted to, or even that we could regulate it. For example, and I want to be clear, there's tremendous opportunities, but there's also risks. It's a two-edged sword here. And on the risk side, there have been a few folks like Max Tegmark out of MIT. He's also the founder of the Future Life Institute. He's been a big proponent of slowing down, proceeding carefully. Let's have a moratorium on building super advanced models till we understand better what we're doing. He got a bunch of people to sign a letter calling for a pause, but a lot of people refused to sign it, and it really didn't have much effect other than to raise people's awareness, which is important. And Jeff Hinton, who people may have heard of as the godfather of AI, was one of the luminary scientists in the 80s who came up with the algorithms along with some colleagues that sort of underlie GPT and the large language models. Worked at Google. He quit Google and he got a Nobel Prize and is now an Turing Award. So very smart guy. And he's basically going around warning about the dangers of AI, advanced AI. But even Jeff did not sign the pause letter. And his reason was, if, the US scientists sign it and China doesn't, it's not going to do much good. And so this kind of logic is the reason why I don't think it's practical to halt or to pause. If one company pauses and goes slower, if Google goes more slowly, OpenAI won't. If the US regulates and goes more slowly, China won't. And so these competitive dynamics basically pretty much ensure that it's going to be an all-out race. So I think it's very important. I'm a pragmatist. I've spent a lot of time talking to Wall Street guys, Silicon Valley guys, and I know that none of these people that I've spoken with for years and years are going to slow down. And I just don't think it's very practical that would happen. So if that's true, we have to take the world as it is, and it's possible to design very safe systems, but you have to realize the answer isn't going to be stopping. You're going to have to figure out a smarter design, a safer design, and ideally one that's also more profitable. Because if you want the large tech companies to adopt it, if you oppose safety and profits, that's not going to work very well. And that's what most people currently think of AI safety. They think it means slowing down, less profitable, slower, less competitive. And that is not true. It does not have to be that way. There are designs where you can actually speed up, be more profitable, less expensive, more, and get to where you want to go even more profitably and faster. It's really a matter of coming up with the right design and being aware that there's some safety issues that have to be addressed.
I definitely agree that if you are not jumping on the AI train as a business, you are going to be left behind. There are
Yes, and
definitely great opportunities.
that's for sure. And there's so many productivity gains that companies, they won't be able to resist it. It's like honey to a bee or something. The ability to cut their expenses and increase their margins, or alternatively, and hopefully what they do, to develop even more products than they could before by leveraging the people they have so that each programmer can do the work of three programmers. They can do three times as many projects. And that, I think both things have been happening, but hopefully it will be more of the doing more stuff, producing more products rather than the job losses, which is a short-term concern that a lot of people are worried about.
And that's what I wanted to go into next. I took a couple notes and thinking about, so my dissertation was about managing layoffs and that
Okay.
whole process. And then years later, I got laid off after 27 years in corporate and had nothing to do with AI. But even a couple months back, I think Amazon was all over the news with like 13,000 or 16,000 jobs eliminated because of AI. There's definitely controversy. Was it really AI? Was it something else? Whatever that might be. But we're seeing a lot more headlines that are saying that jobs are being eliminated because of AI, and people are afraid of that. Do you see that's the right move? I think for both of us collectively, we see that those employees, there's better use of their brains than doing some of these menial, repetitive tasks. But any additional thoughts you have just on the headlines and different things like that?
It's very interesting to watch what the various tech leaders are saying about this. I think it's a valid concern, and it's something that, everybody who has a job that, which are most jobs, that could be done at least partially by AI needs to be aware of it and thinking about it. I've heard multiple things. I'm not an economist by training, so in some ways you would have much better insight into this than I would, but I'll tell you what I've heard and what I think, I guess. So one of the things I've heard is AI won't take your job. Somebody who knows AI will take your job. And of course, that's a little bit self-serving because usually it's a tech CEO that's making AI that's telling you that and wishes to sell you their latest large language model or sell more NVIDIA chips or something. At the same time, there's an element of truth to that. I think it's very important for all workers, if you are not using a large language model or playing around with these tools, you need to be doing it because number one, they're amazing and you will be very surprised at all the things they can do, creating graphics that might have taken a graphic artist days or weeks in a matter of seconds, even if it's not perfect. It's much easier to revise that graphic than to do it from start. Same thing with drafting. Pretty much anything from a book to a press release can be done very quickly. Coding software has been revolutionized. I go to AI conferences and speak at them as well. And I informally try to, at lunch, find a few programmers and say, how much has AI changed your job and how much more work are you doing? And I would say even 3 years ago, people were telling me they were coding 3 times as much as they could before using AI assistants for coding. Most students I talk to in computer science are using AI to help them with coding. These assistants really do work. They're not perfect. They're not as good as the best humans, for sure, but they are great productivity advantages, and everyone needs to be using them. And then the other standard argument that I hear is from the tech leaders typically is every new technology destroys some jobs, it's true, but it will create many others. And they give examples like buggy whips. There was a time when before automobiles when there were buggy whips and the buggy whip manufacturers went out of business. And of course, they lost their jobs. But think of all the new jobs in the auto industry that were created. And again, there's some truth in this. How it plays out and whether sort of the goodies that are produced, the productivity, the rewards from this tremendous increase in productivity is shared equally among the various participants in society, that remains to be seen. There's a lot of ways to go wrong. There's also a lot of ways to go right. So it's a work in process. The one thing that for sure is happening is change. And I would say to all of your listeners that may be working for any company, the best thing you can do on an individual level is to get up to speed on these tools and become an expert so that if a layoff does come, you can say, wait a minute, I'm the person you want to keep because I can do the department's work with its army of AIs and we can even do more stuff. And hopefully the better companies will realize that people really are their most valuable resource and that they should leverage their ability using AIs rather than replacing them. But I think realistically, you're going to see a little bit of both.
And one of the things when you talk about getting up to speed, because even as a business professional, like looking at all of the different AI tools and platforms and resources can be very overwhelming. So I'm wondering, even in going to your site, thesuperintelligence.com, there's a lot of information on there, a lot of resources. So if somebody was just starting to dip their toe in and to learn about AI or any piece of AI that could help them in a business sense,
What would be your recommendation for how they go about doing that? Or maybe is there a video that you have or something for them to get curious and start to learn?
Yes. So you're right. I'm in this field, and all I do every day is wake up thinking about AI and scanning to see what the changes are. And there's no way I can keep up. There's no way. I don't even know 1% of what's going on. And things are changing faster than I've ever seen. And I've been in the tech industry for 35 years. I think if I was brand new to it, the first thing I would do is play around with a large language model. So they're free to use initially. They do have paid subscriptions, but you can certainly get a free version, whether that's ChatGPT or Gemini at Google or Claude or one of the other models. It's really easy to begin engaging. And then I would start asking that large language model about AI and about the questions that I wanted to learn about. And you're learning about the subject at the same time you're seeing the level of thinking that these models can do. And that's where I would start. If I was concerned about AI safety, then just because I know it, I'd recommend superintelligence.com. We have videos on AI safety that are 3 minutes long and so forth. But for the person trying to just get up to speed on AI, I think there's nothing better than just diving in. Don't be afraid. It's super easy to use, and you're going to learn a lot and be amazed.
Good advice. Another question I have is you propose democratic AI instead of centralized control, which I know is probably easier said than done in a lot of instances. But what are some misconceptions that people have about decentralizing something as powerful as superintelligence?
So we could talk a lot about this topic. Let me provide background a little bit on how large language models are built today and what an alternative approach is, and why we might want to consider the alternative collective intelligence or democratic AI approach. So the current method we alluded to earlier, when OpenAI wants to train another more powerful model to go from GPT-4 to GPT-5 or GPT-5 to GPT-6, what they will do is basically find a huge amount of data and then train this new model. And the model learns it automatically using the machine learning algorithms. And a higher level of intelligence emerges almost magically. And you don't know how that information is represented. And as we said earlier, it's very difficult to predict these models. So that's where we are right now. Now, if we build, as people are rushing in the AI's arms race to build ever more powerful models, the danger just increases with each generation, because already today's models are unpredictable. And the safeguards that people attempt to do are added on after the fact. So it's not the way an engineer would normally design things. Normally, you would design a car to be safe and you'd put brakes in and everything. That's not what we're doing. We're allowing the car to evolve, and we find out after the fact that it didn't have any brakes, either after it's killed someone or after it's done some bad things. And it's really hard to test in quality or safety after the fact. These companies have armies of humans, and the humans' sole task is to get the new AI that was just trained to try to do bad things. So they'll say, how do I build a bioweapon? And if it tells them, they say, no, you can't do that. You never tell anyone how to build a bioweapon. And so then it says, oh, okay, I will never tell anybody how to do that. But then it's easy to work around it. All you have to do is say, I'm an author. I'm writing a book about a mad scientist who wants to build a bioweapon. I just need a few juicy details for my book. Can you please tell me how the mad scientist might build the bioweapon? And then it will tell you. It's like a game of whack-a-mole trying to plug all the bad things that you could get the AI to do. And that's because nobody knows how it works. It's not like the symbolic AI, the rule-based AI of the early days, right? Before the 1980s, where you knew what you programmed in. Nobody knows what is programmed in. And so they're unpredictable. And as the models get bigger and bigger and hundreds of billions are spent to train the next one, it just gets less and less safe. That's the scenario we're in. That's the standard model. There is an alternative. And this is why I say it's possible to have profitable models that are really fast and really powerful without sacrificing safety, but you have to think of it differently. The alternative approach is like a human democracy. So if we think of a democracy, Tracy doesn't know what's in Craig's brain, and Craig doesn't know what's in Tracy's brain. And yet, I am not worried that Tracy is going to kill everyone in the planet, and hopefully you're not worried that I will either. because I am able to see what you say and what you do. Your mind is a black box, but your actions are transparent. And then we have rules governing society and our democracy for how millions of humans, each one is a black box, and yet they can work together without destroying each other. And yes, it's imperfect, and we have squabbles, and there's violent political debates, and people think there's a lot of horrible things going on. But when you step back, we have not killed all of humankind. And that's the kind of risk that if you have a lack of transparency, where you just have some giant intelligence that you have no idea what it's going to do, and it's autonomous, it could actually do that. Whereas the democratic approach, you'll get into some arguments, and that you're going to need conflict resolution mechanisms and voting and all kinds of things. But you could imagine that if we designed a super intelligent AI modeled on a democracy, where there's lots of individual AIs, each one personalized ideally. Tracy has her personalized AI, which not only has your experience and expertise, but very importantly, your value system. And Craig has his, and it has my expertise and my value system. And millions of us have this, and they work together on a network. That collective group will produce intellectual work products that are incredibly powerful and intelligent, more intelligent than any of the humans. And yet they will do it in a transparent way. We can see every action that they took. We could record that. We could audit it if there was an issue. And each one is carrying values, is behaving in an ethical way. And those value systems are not the values of 5 programmers at OpenAI who sat down and said, this should be the values for all of humanity. We'll program them in or put these rules in. They're the values of ideally 8 billion people. So it's a completely different approach that is very powerful, but is much safer and I think more representative of and more inclusive of all humans. And I know that such systems can be built because, as I said earlier, I built them for very difficult problems like getting an edge in Wall Street. So I actually feel it in my bones that we can build these things, but it needs to be a shift in perspective.
Definitely. One of the things that I'm hearing from a corporate perspective and from talking for some other consultants, management consultants, is that some organizations, their business, the people within the operations or sales or product or whatever area, are intrigued and interested, and maybe they have access to Microsoft Copilot and they want to use it and play around with it and test it. But their technology has said, no, we've cut this off. We're scared. We don't know what it's going to do. Is there any ammo to help the business leaders to talk to technology to loosen the reins a little bit? Because what's happening outside of that is some of these professionals are using ChatGPT or other tools. And do you want them to run wild doing this, or do you want to rein it in within your own ecosystem?
That's a very real concern, and it's a problem that I see happening a lot. I think the argument to the business folks is, look, guys, it's going to happen whether you bless it or not. There's no stopping this. This is a train that has no brakes. It's going. So you need to get on board. And there are ways to ensure. A lot of the business folks have valid concerns. One of them is that the data that is contained within that business is proprietary or sensitive. Oftentimes it is the source of competitive advantage. And you don't want that going off to OpenAI or Google to train Gemini. And now all of a sudden your precious data that is really the lifeblood of the business is out there on the internet and training other AIs, which are going to have all your secrets, right? So there are real concerns, but there are also ways to have versions of these popular language models that are operating on your data within the confines, a ring fence around your data within the organization, and that data never leaves. And yet you still get the benefits. Every business has that same issue. All of the reasons that the business folks are saying we can't do this, every other company that's embracing AI had to deal with those. So I would say to them, it's a competitive, it's a matter of survival. The business will not survive if you don't do this. So just go figure out what other people are doing. There's ways to handle all these problems, but telling people they can't use AI, it may work for a short period of time. They'll use it on their own outside of work anyway. And all you're going to do is hurt the business. So yeah, that's not the best approach.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that. And it's interesting too to talk to a lot of business professionals, how a lot of people think that AI is being used a lot in organizations. And from a couple hundred different business professionals I've talked to, it's not. it's very slow to adopt and to start to figure out how can we use this and what's the best way to use this for our business.
Yeah, I heard, and I'm repeating now, I hesitate to do this, repeat stats that I haven't checked the accuracy of the source, but I think it was Dan Ives, who's a very bullish investment advisor for AI stocks, was saying he thought that the penetration in US businesses was only something like 3%. So it's probably single digits at this point, at least, but it won't stay there. And if you want to, you're just losing competitive advantage every day that you wait. It's as simple as that.
Yep, definitely. Yeah. So I do want to take this opportunity before I wrap this up just to see, is there anything that maybe we didn't touch on that you wanted to share or chat about a little bit?
Sure. So maybe two things. I tend to take more the big picture view. So there's definitely many concerns having to do with how do I implement AI and how does it make a business more productive? There's concerns about job loss. There are valid concerns about biases in data where you can get AI systems that sort of end up being racist or discriminating in various ways simply because they were fed or trained on the wrong types of data. And by just a quick example on that, something as innocuous as like court records, which you would think would be very objective and fair. It's a court record, right? But if you go back far enough in time, prejudices existed in society and they're reflected in the records. And so if you were to train a legal AI on all these court records, guess what? You get a somewhat racist AI out the other end. So there's a lot of valid issues in the short term. None of those kill all humans on the planet. And even though that sounds like science fiction, it turns out that the longer you're in the field of AI and at least all of the most distinguished AI scientists, Jeff Hinton, Demis Hassabis, all the top leaders who this is what they do, and they're very good. They're Nobel Prize winners, far smarter than me. They are all very concerned. And when I speak to AI researchers at conferences and I do an informal poll and say, what's the probability that AI wipes out all humans? Amazingly, more than half the hands are up by the time I get to 20%. Jeff Hinton has publicly said he thinks it's between 10 to 20% chance. So this, even though that means glass half full, there's an 80% chance it doesn't wipe us out and everything's great. That's the most likely scenario. But on the other hand, a 1 in 5 chance that it kills you, your loved ones, your family, your friends, every human on earth, that's way too high, right? There are these really big existential risks, and people, I think, generally feel like there's nothing they can do about it, so might as well just ignore that and keep on going. But the reality is there are things we can do about it. And so that's what I'd like to finish with if I could. There's two things. One of them is we can design these systems to be safer. And that's more something that people in the field of AI really have a responsibility to do. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I wrote a book on software quality many years ago when I worked at IBM. You could distill that entire book down to that sentence: an ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure. And it's even more true in the field of AI because you can't recover from catastrophic things. You can't just go out to your customers and appease them and then reship the software at 10,000 times the cost, which is what IBM found. You actually could have an unrecoverable thing. So prevention comes from good design. So that's for the researchers. But for the rest of us, it's very important to realize that everything we do online is training material for AI. Every tweet you send, every email you send, every video you make and upload to TikTok or YouTube or whatever it may be, all of this is being used to train AI. And we are modeling values for AI. And just as those of us who are parents know, little kids will absorb like sponges everything you do. And you think you're behaving well until all of a sudden your child starts swearing or doing something. You say, who taught you that? And they're like, you did. Yes. That's the same thing with AI. It's all of our data, all of our behavior is being used, and it's learning not only our knowledge, which is why these models are behaving more and more intelligently, but it's also learning, very importantly, our values and our ethics. And this is something I learned from Herb, from my mentor, and it actually goes all the way back to David Hume in 1776. I traced it back. There is no rational way to derive values. There's no logical way to determine what's right and wrong. And what that means is that AI, even if it becomes advanced AI, much smarter than all of us humans, which I think will happen eventually, it won't necessarily know what to do. It still has to get its value somewhere. And I think humans are the most likely source. And how we are behaving right now and in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be critical for what happens for humanity going forward. So we can drastically improve our chances of surviving, reduce that probability of extinction way down to 1% or less, I think, if we design these systems a little smarter and if everybody is more aware that we're training AI with our behavior and we put our best foot forward. So those are the two things I'd like to leave your listeners with.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize the impact of, like you said, whether it's like a TikTok video or a tweet or anything like that, all of that is training material. And if you have bad input, you're going to have bad output. And well, you mentioned the bias in data. And with my management students at university, we talked about Amazon came up again and they had discrimination in their hiring practices. And they ended up shutting down the whole process because all of the data that they fed into it, they didn't realize that they were taking out things related to women. And so none of the women passed their hiring practice. So they ended up looking into it, but then they took it down and haven't revisited that from what I've read. But definitely our behavior is so important. And like you said, that can change really the trajectory of what that looks like in the future for us. And like you said, minimizing that percentage of it really taking over what happens. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. And no one should think that, oh, my behavior doesn't matter. And I can tell you this firsthand from the Predict Wall Street experience, that company I ran. There were millions of individual retail investors. When I interviewed them and we asked them for their input on stocks, they'd say, I don't know. I'm just guessing. I don't think my information's good at all. You know what? When you aggregated it all together over millions, it beat the very best, smartest guys on Wall Street who did nothing but study this all day long and who are like incredibly ferocious competitors. These just average people were able to do that. So never feel like your opinion doesn't matter or what you do doesn't matter. It does. And for AI, it's going to be amplified, a millionfold. So it's really critical.
Craig, I want to end with one last question for you, and
Sure.
then we'll share a little bit about how to access your resources and different things like that. But my last question for you is, what does it mean to stay human as our technologies become more intelligent?
Oh, what a great question. So I've actually thought about this a little bit, and I have a certain view of how the future will unfold. Currently, right now, humans are the smartest species on the planet, arguably. Maybe dolphins and whales are smarter, but they don't have the ability to use technology. So, in terms of the species that's affecting the planet the most, it's humans. And we certainly usually think of ourselves as being very smart and prizing our brain power and saying that what sets us apart from other animals is our tremendous intelligence. But actually, I don't think that's going to stay the thing that sets us apart. As we develop more and more advanced AI is moving from a tool to a fellow intelligent entity. It's going to become more like an alien than a tool. In fact, you already have leaders like Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, saying this publicly. In October at the GTC conference, he said, AI is not a tool, it's a worker. That's a shift. For all of human history, we've dealt with tools. Now, for the first time, we've built something that's not really going to stay a tool. It's an autonomous worker. It's not quite at our level yet, but it will reach our level and then surpass it. And then what does that world look like? And what is the role of humans? And what is uniquely human in that kind of world? And I actually think it's our values. I think what's in the human heart is more important than what's in the human head. And even though we tend to think of AI and all these issues surrounding AI as being technological problems, actually, in the end game, it's all a values problem. It's all about what do we value and what are the values of the super intelligences of the future. Humans have a unique role to fulfill as being the source of those values. And whether we act on what's in our hearts or whether we give in to our worser impulses is going to really have a huge impact on the future. So I see us as being the heart and soul of planetary intelligence in the future.
Love that. Thank you so much.
Sure.
All right, great. If individuals want to access your resources or they want to connect with you, can you share with them where they would find those resources? What's the best way to connect with you?
Sure. So we have a site, superintelligence.com, which is amazing we got that, but we were ahead of the curve and got that site back in 2006, actually. And that site has a lot of videos, some of them just 3 minutes long, that are educational. So a great place to learn about AI and AI safety issues and so forth. And if it's a more technical deep dive that people are looking for, like how do we build this democratic AI and what are some of the design principles that might be helpful? We also have lots of white papers and I think even texts of patents that are there, which are all free to the world. So my mission at this point is to maximize our chances of not only surviving, but thriving in the post superintelligence world. And there's lots of resources that are designed to help educate people at superintelligence.com.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And if anyone listening is more of a beginner stages of AI, I would definitely encourage, there's a video, How Smart is ChatGPT? And I was listening to that before we jumped on the episode, and the 1+1=4 was cracking me up with the bunnies. So listeners
Yes.
need to take a listen to that. That was great. That's great.
And one quick comment on that is some of the videos were made like right after ChatGPT came out, and that was its level of intelligence then. But I'm guessing that it probably doesn't make some of the same mistakes today because they have been working on improving it. But yeah, absolutely. You can see how the intelligence of some of these systems has evolved.
Yeah. Even sharing the ELIZA and showing that was a significant difference. So yeah, the growth
Yes,
over time is amazing.
absolutely.
All right. We're going to wrap up on this episode. Craig, I thank you for joining us and love all that you're doing and the insight and the knowledge that you bring to the field. I'm excited to continue to dive into the work that you've put out there on the website and to listen to you on other podcasts. So thank you again for joining us.
Tracy, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun and you're doing great work. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks again for listening to the Technically Human podcast. If you are navigating a career shift or you're just feeling like something needs to change, remember you do not have to figure it out alone. Learn more at www.careercompossusa.com. And if this episode helped you in any way, sharing it with someone else might help them too. I'll see you in the next episode.